Well, good evening and welcome to Kopernik Observatory. My name is Drew Desker. I'm the director of Kopernik, and it's great to have you here this evening for tonight's program. And hopefully we'll do some observing afterwards. Let me just see here. Let me just switch off of this mode and get to my standard introduction here. So, give me a moment here. And here we go. All right. So actually, first thing I usually like to do is find out who's here for the first time or not since your fourth grade field trip. All right, a few people. All right. Who here are members? All right, a good portion of the rest of you. Great. For those that aren't members, I always like to point out that a Kopernik membership is actually quite valuable. Not only does it get you into Kopernik on a weekly basis. We do these Friday night programs from March to mid-December, but also we have some other special events that you could also get in for free. But what's also great is that we belong to what's called the ASTC, Association of Science and Technology Centers, and it's a consortium of about 380 other science centers that honor each other's memberships. So with a Kopernik membership, you can get into the Robeson Museum, you can get into the Corning Museum of Glass down in Elmira, you could go to the Franklin Institute down in Philly, or the Intrepid down in New York City. And it's all for free. So if you like this kind of place, consider getting a membership. Kopernik has actually been around for over 50 years. We are a public observatory and an informal STEM education facility. We actually had a school group in here from Otago. Some second graders came in here and they did some spike Lego robotics, and they built and launched some air rockets, and I took them on a tour of our scopes. And so we just actually, this is the last school group of the school year up here today. But we are now going to start, we're about ready to start our summer camps. And for the 34th year, we have run STEM-themed summer camps for youth between second grade up through high school. Actually, if you go to our website, you can go to our summer camp section, and you can see what camps are still available. Again, for second, we group them in two grades together. But again, it starts as early as kids that are currently in first grade that are going into second, all the way up through high school. And a camp that I run is called Return to the Edge of Space, where our students will build a payload that will launch on a weather balloon that'll go up to over 100,000 feet. We'll track it. The weather balloon will have cameras. We'll be flying a Geiger counter. We'll be flying a slow scan television system where it actually takes pictures throughout its flight and then sends it back over radio in a slow scan format. So if you know somebody, either a child or a grandchild that might be interested, definitely check that out. But one of the things I really enjoy are these Friday night programs. It's an opportunity for us to really continue our education. I really at times wish I could live another 50 years. You know, I remember watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and with a computer that it wasn't a whole lot better than some of the calculators we have today. And so just in that 50 plus years, where have we come technology-wise, and what's the next 50 years gonna offer to us? So it's an opportunity for these programs are an opportunity for us, and especially for younger kids, to see get them to think about where they might go as a career. So one of the things that we started doing actually right during COVID, when COVID happened, is starting to live stream these. When COVID happened, we couldn't bring people into a room, but we had all these speakers lined up. So we said, look, why don't we have the speakers zoom into us? We'll just put it back out on our YouTube channel. And so if you go to YouTube and type in Kopernik Observatory, we have over 14,000 subscribers, and so you're able to watch these live. So if you're not able to come here in person, you can actually watch it on YouTube live. But also what's great about it is that you can look at the last 6 years worth of our Friday night program. So last weekend, Last Friday we had a talk on summer skies. What's going to be up in the skies this summer. The week before that was the Southern Tier Robotics. This was a high school group building a robot that was extraordinary. And so they brought it up here and demonstrated it. We've had talks about virtual reality. We had a group from Binghamton University that are doing building their own rocket, and they're trying to get it up to Cayman line. So again, not everything we do here is about astronomy, but it's a great opportunity for us to just expand our knowledge. But not only do we do this with sort of Friday nights, but if there is something going on from an astronomy standpoint, we will do live observing. And so actually last year, there was a lunar eclipse that most of you probably missed because it started at 2:30 in the morning. And our live stream astronomer, Jenny Carty, did a time lapse of that eclipse. So this is what we can. So you start seeing the penumbra start to close, cover up the moon. Eventually, she'll change the exposure so that we start to see that that blood moon, the light that's refracted through our atmosphere that only really lets the red light through. And here we are in full eclipse. What's great about lunar eclipses is the moon. A full moon typically wipes out almost everything in the night sky, but when you're in a full eclipse, all of a sudden the Milky Way pops up. All those really dim stars show up again. Then again, she'll change the exposure back again as to get us back to what we normally see for our a regular exposure that we normally view. So these are the kind of things that we can offer here. So again, you can even go, like later this evening, you could actually go back and you could actually go and listen to this again, or tomorrow morning. And what's great about this program is that we literally have people from around the world watching these programs. So I'm going to introduce our speaker this evening is Dana Carris, and I've known Dana for a number of years. I knew him as a high school intern, and he's done us very proud by taking sort of getting inspired about choosing a STEM career and now making it his career. And so Dana, maybe you can also talk about your education path and obviously what you're doing now and where you plan to go. So I'm going to give it back to you. I'm going to get up your PowerPoint presentation, and off we go. Go ahead.
All right, awesome. Well, as Drew said, my name's Dana Carris, and back in, must have been 2012, I think, is when I first started up here, assisting with classes, helping with observing, with the scopes, and even mowing the lawn sometimes as an intern. So it's kind of surreal to be back here actually giving a presentation so many years later. So I'd like to thank Drew and the Observatory for having me. And yeah, so my talk today is going to be about shipwrecks and submerged heritage. So it's a little bit different than some of the talks you get up here most of the time, but I want to try and focus on sharing the technology, the innovations, and the science behind the history and the archaeology. Because you need all that to be able to get the visuals, the background, the context that everyone is so interested in. All right. So for today, I'm going to start off with just an introduction, kind of giving a background on what is maritime archaeology or underwater archaeology, kind of who it started with, where it started, what's involved. And then I'm going to go into some of the technology, some of the methods, the old, the new, the developments. And then I'm going to try and break it down into the basics of searching for, discovering, and then trying to document and share sites. And in the end, I want to give a little bit of background about New York's unique underwater cultural heritage, since there's a huge variety here, which a lot of people just don't easily get exposed to. And there's tons of great resources across the state that I think a lot of people should be interested in and need to be well shared. So what is maritime and underwater archaeology? Like, everyone's got a different view when they think of it. Some people think of, Spanish galleons. Some people think of the Titanic. Some people think of World War II or ancient Greek and Roman shipwrecks. And it's all of these things. But what is it that allows us to be able to study and access these things? And in the news, sure, a lot of you a couple years ago saw Shackleton's Endurance being found in Antarctica. Pretty much, I mean, my algorithm is probably pretty biased at this point, so I see these things a lot more often than most people might. But you'll see interesting stories about, sending down ROVs and drones to look at World War II shipwrecks, or, new discoveries of 300, 400-year-old porcelains, and all these really, eye-catching, unique pieces of history. But for it to get to here, there's been a huge amount of advancement and technology over the last 70, 80 years that has allowed us to be able to access these sites and learn about them and share them. So when I talk about maritime and underwater archaeology, they're very similar things. There's just a few minor differences. Both of them are tied together by the scientific study of human history and culture through physical remains. And the key word is the physical, the material culture. So this is kind of independent of written records. It's just what we can physically see and get a hold of. When you're talking about maritime, it's focusing on shipwrecks, harbors, jetties, ports, anything that's about humans' intentional interactions with the sea, with marine resources, with water. Where underwater archaeology, it's the same, except instead of the focus being specifically on our interactions with the sea, it's anything that's underwater. So it could be sunken aircrafts, it could be submerged landscapes, could be underwater buildings, flooded cities. It just doesn't have to be directly tied to our interactions with the ocean. So the beginnings, you gotta have this idea of what salvage is versus the scientific study, because that's where the scientific study is the key difference between it. So salvage is something that's been done since antiquity. When something gets lost, you have valuable material that can be reused, you have cargo, and people want to recover it to regain their value. And that goes for something you lost recently in collecting it, or even thousands of years later, something is found, like some of the earliest salvage operations once surface-applied scuba diving, like this guy here, was around, were happening in the Mediterranean. You'd have these sponge divers, these people who were just down collecting sponges to sell, and in doing this work, you will just run into shipwrecks. So they're a source of value, and they would be salvaged. But there wasn't this focus of recording the context, not necessarily a care about the ship, just what it is you could get out of it for its value. So the incentives are different. And then really the scientific study in this field started in the 1960s, and it was because the new technological developments kind of allowed for it. So in the 1940s, you had Jacques Cousteau and Emile Gagnon, who had created the aqualung, the first scuba diving apparatus. So it allowed people to access, for relatively cheap and easily, these deeper sites, places we couldn't get to before we couldn't work. So once that was developed, it allowed, at a much reduced price, access to these places. So scientists and archaeologists were able to begin going to these places to actually study them. And now the intent was coming to the scientific recording and the learning and the knowledge sharing instead of the artifact recovery. So the first underwater scientific excavation was in 1960 in Cape Gelidonia in Turkey, which is a Bronze Age shipwreck around 1200 BC. So over here is a photo from that first excavation. So you can see the photo kind of dates itself. The equipment is quite old. But since that first excavation, now there's been hundreds across the world. And it's because of this first pioneering excavation proving that you could actually scientifically collect data at these depths, the same way you would excavate on land. Now that that was proven, and now the technology is advanced, we've been able to go to hundreds and hundreds of sites and do the same kind of work. So, at the beginning, you'd have these rudimentary systems. You'd have, lower quality cameras, much more expensive or harder to maintain camera housings. And now you have all this new technology that's, more widespread, cheaper, easier to produce, and allows us to more easily and quickly record sites or stay at them longer or access ones that we couldn't even 50 years ago. So now I want to try and break down a little bit of the technologies involved in discovery, like how it is that we will find sites, and then a little bit into what it is we do to actually document them and share them. So discovery, it's all about location. So where something is going to influence the way that you can look for it. So if you're having divers physically in the water, what's the visibility? What are the depths? What's the current? Is something polluted? All of these can have a role in how you choose to look or how you're able to look, how it's safe to look. And then think about your environmental conditions. Is where you're looking, has it had significant storms over time? Is there a significant change in the seabed or the local environment? Can that obscure or reveal sites? Is there significant sedimentation? Does it change annually? Is there a massive change over time because of some human developments? All these things can change where it is you can look and how it is you're going to plan your way to go about it. And also your objectives. So are you looking for something specific? Do you know what it is you're looking for? Say you have records of a known 19th century shipwreck that you want to go and find specifically that one. That's going to affect the way you plan it. Or if you have, say, a World War II plane or a ship that sank and you have military records showing where this may be, that's going to influence your decisions behind how and where you're going to go look. Then you get into your archival sources and your historical sources. If you have these available, can you use them to help? Then other objectives, if you're just doing a general survey, so like if there's a construction project or a new development, legally in the States you have to go through cultural heritage assessments and impact studies to see if anything's going to be affected. So that goes for near shore and ports, and offshore for wind turbines or for wells or for pipelines or cables. You have to go and search these specific areas. So then your choices in technology and equipment is going to be based on partially regulations, where it is you can look, and what it is you think you're looking for. And then a lot of it is also just serendipity and accidents. There's a ton of sites that are just found either by dumb luck or pure chance. Sometimes, someone will just be out digging and they'll hit something. You have a boat trawling and they're going to pull up an anchor or hit some wreck that no one knew was there. And that's how you find it. Sometimes there'll be a storm, or sometimes there may be a man-made disaster that's going to end up revealing something. So as much as there is the planning and the intentional searching, a lot of the best things just kind of come up by accident. So for searching, one of the easiest methods would be diver surveys, which this is a lot of what I've done for my career. So you can send down scuba divers or surface supply divers, with a hard hat and a helmet tied to an air system on a boat, and you can search for sites this way. What I've done a lot of is transect surveys, so having an area that you can space out people to swim along a landform or in a certain direction, and just visually keep an eye out for remains. And usually you have an idea already of what it is could be here, what it is you're looking for. Say it's lithics, like stone tools, or maybe it's antique pottery, or more modern metals. And you can also send divers down to a known site. So someone has previously identified something from another survey, or some fisherman hit something and they give you some coordinates. You can go out, put a buoy in the water, send some divers down, and then do a systematic survey. We'll call them like circle searches or jackstay searches, where you set a distance and go around a certain point, expanding over time if you can't find it in the first place. And these photos kind of are just very lucky in terms of the conditions for this work. where you can see the visibility is just fantastic. And that's where these visual surveys really hit their mark, where they're the best. But a lot of the time, it's not that way. A lot of times, you'll be in just completely muddy, filthy water. You can't even see your hand if it's a couple inches from your face. You have to do everything by feel. Sometimes that's just what you get stuck with, and certainly makes it more difficult, but occasionally those are the conditions. So the visibility in these cases is something that significantly can help with these surveys. And then one of the more common methods for identifying submerged sites is for geophysical surveys. So there's a bunch of technology that's used for remote sensing, ways you can see the seafloor and below the seafloor without actually having to get to it. So the basic technologies that we use are usually a side-scan sonar, multi-beam sonar, or sub-bottom profiler, or magnetometer. So I'll go into detail about these ones. There's a few others, but these are the core basics. So like side-scan sonar, some of you may have seen images like these before. These are mosaics. So these are all based off acoustic imagery. So you have a transducer. In this case here, I have a photo of a towfish. So this is something that would be attached to a computer system on your ship, or in some cases it could be off a little drone, and it'll be sending out sound pulses constantly, and it'll be another transducer will be collecting those pulses on the return, where you can the system will calculate the distance and see kind of how hard or soft an object is based on the return signals. So these are just some examples of different side-scan sonar imagery. So these two here are very clearly shipwrecks. Here you see the hull of a ship that looks like the rudder here sticking out, its bow sticking into the water, and this black line over here would be what you can see here, which is what you call your nadir. It's the spot underneath your device that's underneath your ship that it's not collecting data. The beam of sound that's being sent out is not there. But here you can see this nice bright white return from the hull of this ship. It's telling you that this object here is very, very hard. It's a very hard acoustic return. Down here where you see it's a little bit darker, it's muddy or sandy. It's just a much softer material. And then this black spot here is what you call the acoustic shadow. So this is a spot behind where your sound waves are coming from that you can't see. Oh, excuse me, I'll go back, because it's being blocked by the object that, well, in this case, the ship's hull. And those, like this image, you're pretty lucky when you see something like this. It's very clear, it's very easy to identify, and a lot of times it's not going to be that way. So here is an example of a more unclear image. I mean, these could be trees, they could be pipes, these could be cages for crabbing, it could be any number of things. So it's not something that's necessarily going to be easy to interpret or figure out until you can go and get some visual identification on it. Whereas this one, in another case, is very simple, where you can see the distance here at the top, and you know that your device is over here reflecting this way because you have this big shadow here that kind of tells you how tall the object you're looking at is. So in this case, you have a fairly tall ship that's proud above the seafloor. And then over here is this is an example of an aircraft, and also showing what different resolutions you can get with this imagery. So a lot of your devices are going to be a high frequency setting and a low frequency setting. So you have a higher frequency sound wave, you get better, cleaner data, higher resolution like this. It looks crisper, but you have benefits and drawbacks with that. You have the benefit of it looks clean and clear, but the drawback, the range that you can view is significantly reduced. So you can use this if you have a small survey area, or you already have identified something with, say, a more coarse system and want to get a better idea of what it might be. All right. So another common technology is your multi-beam sonars. So this is similar to the side scan, but instead this is a device that shoots out a bunch of pings, a bunch of different sound waves all at the same time. That it will measure the time that it takes them to go out, the time it takes for them to return, and then essentially paint a picture of the seafloor. So here's a kind of an example of just clear sea bottom, sound waves going out, striking, and then returning to a transducer, and then creating this image where you can see the relief in the seafloor based on the colors. So this is great for identifying sites as well. So this is a nice image of a side scan versus a multi-beam. So you see it's the same, different tool, the same shipwreck, the same object. So there's different features you can get from one versus the other. But it's a fantastic tool for being able to identify submerged sites. So this image is one I really like. I've seen a lot of different organizations show this as image they've captured, which is a rare case of both a World War I and a World War II ship wrecked at the same point. So it makes a very compelling image for your technologies. And so these acoustic devices that I've gone through, these ones can only look at the surface. They just tell you what you could see if you were down there. But what about stuff that's buried? What about things that you can't see? So there's another device, a sub-bottom profiler, which is also acoustic, but it allows you to see underneath the sediments. So you can have wrecks or landscapes that are buried under feet or meters of sediment over time. So there's no way you'd be able to see them using any of these other technologies. So in this case, it's a much lower frequency sound that's sent out with various different types. So like one they call a boomer has a much lower frequency that you can see much deeper into sediments, where your chirp is going to be a little shallower. You can see very well into less deep sediment with a much higher resolution. So depending on what it is you're looking for, you'll decide to use one technology versus another. So this is kind of what the data will look like. So you can see water column up here, this hard return here from the little bit of sound that's reflected from the surface comes in black, and then you'll see different changes in density. Sometimes this could be because maybe there's a sand layer or a geological change, or maybe if this is a submerged flooded landscape, there was a riverine channel there, or there might have been a hill, or you're somewhere where we've already put pipelines and cables in. Maybe you'll see the reflection of a cable a couple feet buried. And these systems can come hull mounted onto a boat, or they can be something that's towed behind, like you see here, like this one. So these were all acoustic. Now we can also use magnetic signatures. So magnetometer, or marine magnetometer specifically, is a tool that you measure the ambient magnetic field. So the Earth's magnetic field is fairly constant in a local area, and you take this device and tow it, ideally far enough behind your boat that you're not actually having any interference from metal on your ship that can throw the sensors off. And if you pass over an object that's metal, you're close enough to, that object will create its own change in magnetic field. So you'll see this dipole, a positive and a negative. So it'll cause what the natural magnetic field that the device would usually read to flip. So this is great for identifying something much more modern that's ferrous on the surface, but it can also identify buried wrecks, because you can get a lot of modern wrecks that are buried under a significant amount of sediment. So this is a great tool for being able to find those even when you can never see it on the surface. And now, within the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot more push with drones, with autonomous technologies, and with unmanned technologies. And the same way as it's happening in the air, this is happening in the water. So we have all these new toys that can use, among other sensors and sampling equipment, they can use these same technologies we just talked about, but without the need for a person to be at them the whole time, without the need for a vessel. So you have unmanned surface vessels, which all of these here on this are examples of different types of unmanned surface vessels. So this one, this is called a DRIX system. This is one that's used by NOAA for seafloor mapping, for fisheries, for archaeology, for just general bathymetric surveys. And this is quite a large device. The size of these things can vary from the size of a 15-foot plus boat down to 2 feet. So depending on where it is you're going to use something like this, the variability in the size of the equipment is insane. And so then there's also AUVs, autonomous underwater vehicles. So these also come in all kinds of different sizes, shapes for different purposes. Like these ones here, this is one that I was actually on a project using in Alaska a few years ago. And this one we were using to try and identify a submerged World War II wreckage. So this case, this programmable drone has a transducer here that you collect side scan sonar data, and you can tell this device what GPS coordinates to follow, how far it needs to go, what depth in the water, what depth above the bottom it needs to be at, and you can attach additional sensors to it. You could put magnetometers on the back of it. The versatility in these is amazing, and not just for archaeology work, but for any oceanographic work. But yeah, so they can come to these easy-to-use one-man systems to these absolutely massive ones that can last a lot longer and have a much larger suite of equipment, but take significantly more time, money, and personnel to be able to operate. And then ROVs. A lot of you have probably seen these before in news or in reels or videos. So these remotely operated vehicles also come in all kinds of sizes and are great for visual inspections, getting photos, can make 3D models, and the large ones you can put like hands and claws to collect samples or collect artifacts on them. So the large ones for your massive research vessels, for commercial use like this is NOAA's D2 on its research vessel, the Okeanos Explorer. And this can go down thousands and thousands of feet deep. And it's clearly a lot more sophisticated than, say, this little commercial grade chasing ROV, which is about foot long by foot wide, very, very tiny. But this thing can still go down about 300 feet. And it's much more within the price range of your average person, and is easy to use with phone apps. So the range and versatility of these systems is crazy. And like something like this takes a big command center to be able to operate, whereas something like this is just a small phone. All right. And then let's talk a little bit about documentation. So once you find a site, you got to record it. So, still back when all this first started, analog methods are still common. So hand measurements, mapping, writing things down on slate underwater notes, and sketches. They're rudimentary. There's certainly new technologies that you can get more higher resolution, but just because you have these things doesn't negate the use of these more traditional methods. And now with all the cameras and digital equipment out there, high resolution photography, videography, and 3D modeling are kind of the standard for most sites. So up here, this is an example of an ortho photograph based off of a 3D model made just using a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, which is used to create a map of your submerged sites. And then just photos of your divers excavating, your divers recording, sketching and taking notes, and then scaled images of your artifacts. And the technology that I am most interested in, that I like the most, is your 3D modeling and photogrammetry, because this really taken off in the last 10 to 15 years, and now it's just so common throughout the industry. And it's very simple to train people to be able to do it, and all you need is a camera. And conveniently, you can also use historic imagery, like old even film photographs, to try and create these models that you can get reliable, high-quality measurements off of. So it's not just a pretty picture, which is awesome still, great for outreach, great for sharing, but you can get measurable, quantifiable data from them. So that can be also great for monitoring changes to sites over time. So, I mean, these things degrade. Everything's going to degrade over time, whether it's just naturally falling apart, or there's human impacts, or new invasive species. Anything can cause a site to degrade, or people could be taking things, stealing from them. So being able to go and use this technology to record and then monitor sites, you can track how things are changing and then adapt a management plan. Or in some cases, if you're dealing with theft, you're even able to identify specifically what was taken from between the first date you recorded and the second date. So the applications are amazing. And when it comes to the outreach and sharing, Drew, the other day, let me actually make some 3D prints of some things that I had previously scanned. So I was going to just hand those out for people to see. So here, I chose this mainly because I had it with me. But this is a horn coral fossil that I had recovered from the bottom of Skinny Atlas Lake. And I was able to use the photogrammetry, 3D modeling, to create a digital, complete model of this, and then 3D print a one-to-one scale version of it. So I'll pass those around so people can see. And you can do that with artifacts, or you can do it with large sites. So I also have here a much reduced scaled version of a shipwreck in Skinny Atlas Lake that I recorded a few years ago. So in reality, this shipwreck is about 140 feet long. But with about an hour of swimming around taking photos, I was able to get the data to create this virtual model that we were then able to print out and share. So I'll show you the actual digital model of it later. But yeah, so when it comes to outreach, it's quite amazing what you can do. So now, just within the last 15 years, it's taken off. You used to have, it wasn't really a standard method before for recording, but now it's kind of everywhere. So these are just examples of models that I've created from different artifacts and different shipwrecks. So these are all something that you can freely view online in web browsers, and you can even download them, in some cases for free, to make your own 3D prints or to do your own animations. So it's really easy to share the data now. So this is that same one that we're passing around now. This is that same shipwreck that we printed. And so you can get, this is also the low resolution version. There's a much higher one, but the data size is too large to put on this website for free. But it allows you to, instead of having to spend hours on something where you might not have it, you can record something in an hour and come back and review and measure and study it later. So you can see details that you might have missed the first time around. So like here, this is the city of Syracuse, which sank in Skinny Atlas Lake, one of the Finger Lakes on the north end in 1915. And it was left there at the pier, fell into disrepair, and upper works were salvaged, and then this is what was left. But when I first came here, a bunch of people had already previously been to it, but no one really had any clear idea of what was left of it exactly, or what was nearby it. So we ended up finding these frames of other small, rowboats nearby it. And it'll identify where the boiler from the steamship would have sat. And here, a pile of old railroad ties, railroad iron that came from the tram system that used to be in the village just 50 meters away. All right. And yeah, these are just other examples of sites that I've recorded pretty locally. So now I wanted to give a little bit of an idea of what we have around New York, because there's really a huge variety of submerged heritage around the state. And here I'm mostly focusing on post-colonial. So we do have a lot of indigenous Native American sites around New York, but the ones that have been identified underwater is very few, very seldom in our case. There's certainly the potential within the lakes and offshore south of New York City. So back during the last glacial maximum, about 19,000 to 26,000 years ago, sea level was on average about 410 feet lower than it is now. So massive amounts of area were exposed and habitable by early peoples around here. And this goes for many other places in the States and all over the world. In our area, this includes parts of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario and offshore here. So when we talk about like submerged landscapes, it's trying to identify these areas where these people might have been living or might have been moving through. So what features would they have taken advantage of? Natural springs or rivers or gravel outcrops for making stone tools, things like that. But for New York, we don't really have a whole lot of these. That's much more we have down south in like Florida. And we also do have one identified in Lake Huron. All right, but so this is one of my favorite ones for New York. So back in 2010, when they were cleaning up the remains of the World Trade Center after 9/11, there was a shipwreck identified in the rubble about 10, 20 feet underneath the building. So at first glance, a lot of people might be surprised, but places like New York City and other coastal cities, there's a massive amount of landfill over time. There wasn't enough space, there's too many people. They wanted more usable space, so ships would be sunk, land would be moved, trash would be filled in to expand the island. So finding a shipwreck underneath buildings in downtown Manhattan might seem weird at first, but in reality, most of the south of the island was filled in, so there's probably a lot more of them. But this one was quite unique because through dendrochronological dating of some of the timbers, they were able to identify it as being cut, the trees being cut in 1773. And the design of the ship more in line with a gunboat dating to the time of the American Revolution. So after this was excavated, this remains were sent down to Texas A&M University, which is where I attended grad school. So I actually got to work on a couple of these timbers down there. And they've since been sent back to New York, and just last year were put on permanent display in the State Museum in Albany. So if you make it to Albany, you can go see a Revolutionary War era shipwreck that was found underneath the World Trade Center that we would have never known about. And also before this one, back in 1916, there was another one found there, much older, from about 1613, a Dutch ship. But no one knows where that is now. It kind of got lost over time. And in Lake George, so this one is one of my favorites because this boat is just kind of a tragedy in itself. So during the French and Indian War, the British were fighting for control around Lake Champlain and Lake George, and they built this floating gun battery, which was supposed to hold 7 cannons and was a means to try and wrest control of the region from the French. They built it in 1758, and to keep their ships from kind of falling apart over the winter, this one and about 100 other smaller bateaus that they had, they would sink them in shallow waters for the winter, so they'd be under the ice, and then raise them and use them once the ice melted. So otherwise, you leave it out, the freezing and the thawing, it's going to warp the wood, and they're not going to float, or they're going to take a lot more effort. Unfortunately, when they tried to sink this, they screwed up, and it sank extremely deep into 108 feet of water just a couple months after it was built, and they lost it. So it stayed underwater for that entire time until it was rediscovered in the 1990s. And for New York, that's the timelines that a lot of these discoveries are made. It's really only been the last 40 years that stuff has been being found, and even still each year there's new unique sites found constantly. So Lake Champlain has got a huge amount of history. You got colonial period wrecks, Revolutionary War, you have early steam, you have sailing cargo vessels, and the quality of these shipwrecks here is kind of unique in terms of their state of preservation. So when you have wooden wrecks, if they're out in like warm salt water where you got a lot more organics, a lot more oxygen, they're going to be eaten up, they're going to be destroyed. When you have turbulent conditions, stuff degrades significantly faster. But places like the Great Lakes, the Finger Lakes, Lake Champlain, it's cold, it's fresh water, and if they get buried a little bit in mud, it helps a lot with the oxidation. So a lot of these ships look in fantastic shape, either complete or nearly complete. And some of them you'll still have, features like the mast standing completely in place, like it was just put on the bottom. So that's kind of like this one with the Water Witch, one of the sailing freighters. And unique here, you have the oldest steamboat wreck in the U.S. with the Phoenix 1. And this one's quite cool because they found it again back in the 90s as well. But just 6 years ago, they didn't know where the paddle wheels were for the steamer. And someone was out searching with a side-scan sonar, and they accidentally found one of the paddle wheels just a few years ago. And then they contacted some researchers, and they told them where they should look for the second one. And sure enough, next day they found the second one. And then more unique for now, being around the 250th anniversary, we have a lot of Revolutionary War warships there. So back in October of 1776, we had the Battle of Valcour Island, which was one of the first naval engagements of the Continental Navy against the British, trying to deter their advancement further south towards Fort Ticonderoga and towards New York. So we had built a series of row galleys and gondolas, and they tried to fight the British, and it did not go well. A lot of our ships were captured, a lot of them were sunk, but 2 of our gondolas were sank in virtually perfect condition. So this one here is the Philadelphia, which you can find now on display in the Smithsonian. They're currently undergoing restoration, which if you go down there in the next couple months, you can actually see conservators from Texas working on cleaning the wood and some of the cannons and the anchors and the different metal parts. And the sister ship to it here, the Spitfire, is still down there. And just 3 years ago, this was recorded for the first time after its discovery, I think also in the 1990s. So I want to show you that model. So this is what's at the bottom of the lake right now. So 250 years old, but still in fantastic shape. So you have the mast and the top mast still just as they were. This is over 100 feet deep, and you still have the gun mounted at the bow. So, and yeah, so it's definitely one of our best preserved Revolutionary War wrecks, and a remnant from our first naval engagements. And this was made using that really tiny, cheap ROV that I showed earlier. So what you can do with the new, even cheaper technology is quite amazing. All right. So then you come down to the Finger Lakes and the Erie Canal. So a lot of people don't really think of the Finger Lakes as being like a big shipping area. There's not going to be much there. But in the 19th century, it was a lot going on. So After the Erie Canal was built, you had all these other canals as part of the state system, either feeding water or connecting to other regions, like the Chemung Canal that came through Binghamton here. So you'd have these barges or these passenger boats that would carry people and freight from and to New York City to Lake Erie. You would get coal and timber from Pennsylvania coming up through here or coming up to, say, the bottom of Cayuga Lake or Seneca Lake, and then being shipped up the lakes to other canals and connected Erie. So there was a huge amount of activity in this area, so much so that pretty much all of the 11 Finger Lakes have fairly significant shipwrecks in them, either barges from the canals or steamboats or tugs. Most of the big ones have several steamboats used for some for freight, some for passenger service, mostly later in the late 19th century, and they kind of just stopped being economically viable around, when gasoline engines came up. So they would just kind of fall into disrepair and or intentionally be sunk or dynamited in several cases for entertaining everyone nearby, as was the case with the one I showed earlier, the Anlinda, and another one in Skinny Atlas, the Glenhaven. Then when it comes to Cayuga and Seneca, the two largest of the lakes, they both had significant canal boat traffic going to the Erie Canal, bringing materials from Pennsylvania, mostly coal and timber. So the waves can still get pretty significant on those lakes, and as of 2018, 2020, surveys through Lake Champlain Maritime Museum and with the University of Vermont Burlington had identified over 40 different shipwrecks in just those two lakes, with the majority of them being these different canal boats. So these are just two of the many, many examples that have been recorded here. And these guys, the sonar guys, are a pair of shipwreck enthusiasts in the Syracuse area who go around all the lakes, Lake Ontario, the St. Lawrence, and Finger Lakes, searching for and documenting these wrecks. So I highly recommend going and checking these guys out if you're interested. And this also, and beyond the Finger Lakes, this includes like Onondaga Lake at Syracuse or Oneida Lake. These all had connections to the canal systems and had these boats on them. So all these places that now you'd be surprised had significant shipping for a while. And so these are just a couple of the sites that I specifically worked on in Skinny Atlas Lake. So this is the remains of like a log raft. So when most of the area was being settled and farmed and deforested, the logging industry was significant. You would cut down the trees, you'd bring them down to the shore, lash them together in logs, and tow them up the lake to a mill with a sailboat or with a tugboat or whatever you had. So several of the lakes have these rafts that failed. They either got caught in ice or they got cut loose from whatever was towing them, fell apart and sank. So this is one of those in Skinny Atlas Lake, about 80 different logs, about 80 to 60 to 80 feet deep. You can still see like the chains that were used to lash them together. And this little piece here is a horseshoe that they had hammered into one of the logs to help with the lashing. So this is another one of the steamboats there, the Asahinta, sank in 1878. This was more of a local passenger steamer, but newspaper accounts kind of called this a party boat. So you'd have like clubs from, say, Syracuse University that would go out with a keg and have a good time. So it had mixed reviews from the locals. And then this is the one that I was passing around the city of Syracuse. So you can see here, water is crystal clear, which makes looking at this significantly easier. I was actually here like 3 days ago, and I couldn't see anything. The water was terrible that day. So some days it's just fantastic, and you can see everything crystal clear from the top, and some days it's just not. And so then the St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario, these are probably our most unique resources for maritime heritage, because the Great Lakes, it's estimated to have around 6,000 plus shipwrecks throughout all of them. And that's just since the colonial period. So that's only a few hundred years with 6,000 wrecks and several thousands of them are supposed to be assumed to be, identifiable. So just in mouth of the St. Lawrence River near Kingston, Cape Vincent, if anyone's familiar up there, and then going down towards Oswego, we have several hundreds of shipwrecks that are known there so far. And fairly recently, just a couple years ago, the Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary Foundation was created. So it offers federal protected status to these waters and these shipwrecks, and also gives the opportunity for study and future recreation. So, so far, these wrecks in Lake Ontario have kind of been less well known than, say, other parks in Lake Michigan and in Wisconsin, which have been sanctuaries for significantly longer, with many more wrecks identified. So there hasn't been the big diving tourism push in these places yet. But here's just a few examples of some of the more choice ones that have been identified and documented just within the last couple years. That a lot of them look like you just put them on the bottom, beautiful with their masts still standing. Not all of them are like this, but there's quite a few that are. So it's a very unique, very excellent resource, and I highly recommend going and checking out the Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary. And they also do this 3D modeling where you can go and learn about the history behind these ships and the methods and the people behind all of them. So a lot of very nice resources for learning about the heritage around New York. All right, and so this is the end. I did want to quickly, before I stop, play you a little video. Go. So this, is this one? Yeah. So this is from a expedition just last year in Lake Ontario, where they were recording some of these new shipwrecks. So it kind of shows you the people involved, the ships, the technology that we've talked about being applied, and how we get from finding it to these finished products.
I am Holly Pettis, the Deputy Expedition Leader.
And I'm Marley Parker, the Expedition Photographer and Videographer.
We are joining you today in Lake Ontario's National Marine Sanctuary. We are here on a first-of-its-kind expedition where we are documenting the shipwrecks within the sanctuary with our remotely operated vehicle, Rhodey.
Our team is preparing to send our ROV down to a wreck that has never been seen by humans before.
Rhodey at water's edge, lights extended.
The wreck we're going to today is over 600 feet deep.
The main goals of our expedition, Marley, is to go down and document these shipwrecks and produce these high-resolution 3D images.
And it's really cool that we can do this live stream today. This is a really, really important part of our mission, is sharing this imagery, sharing these data. This is what it's all about.
The rectangle is the perspective of the camera, and as you see these little dots popping up in the image, those are correlations of exactly where that component is in time and space. It's a tool that makes sure that we cover and get an image of every piece of the wreck.
Look at that shadow on the sonar from the anchor.
I cannot wait to see this wreck. The feeling that you get is ethereal.
A wreck that hasn't ever been seen by human eyes before. So yeah, we're having a good time, getting some really incredible content. I cannot wait to see the 3D model that comes out of this.
So yeah, that's a nice little local clip that shows what what we can do now and kind of where we've come with this technology. I also like this because you can see these zebra mussels on this ship. This is a good case of how invasive species can affect these places. So zebra mussels came into the Great Lakes around the 1980s. Before that, these shipwrecks would have had nothing like this on them. They would have been completely devoid or had significantly reduced local species of mollusks. So in just a very short amount of time, the damage and the changes to these sites is extremely significant with these invasive species and, pretty drastic environmental changes. And yeah, thank you everyone, and let me know if you have any questions.
All right, so if you have any questions, just raise your hands, because I'd like to bring the mic over so that the people on the live stream can hear it. Just give me a second.
Where did you go to school, and what organizations have you worked with?
So I first got my bachelor's at SUNY ESF in environmental engineering, and then I went back to school and I got my master's at Texas A&M in maritime archaeology. So on the archaeology side, I've worked for a few different groups. So I did a contract with NOAA doing surveys. I've worked with various private commercial archaeological organizations, and I've worked with a bunch of different universities all over the world. So I've worked in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, Atlantic, Caribbean, Pacific, kind of all over for a while.
So how many passport booklets have you gone through?
I got the bigger one this time.
Okay, smart. And yeah, another question here.
My question is about the difference between lakes and oceans. The pristine ships that have the mast that's still in place, do you typically see that in lakes versus oceans?
Lakes are the best spot, and the Great Lakes is probably one of the best places in the world for that, with the amount and the variety of them. You can get it for wooden shipwrecks in the ocean, but it's exceedingly rare, and it only happens in very, very cold places. So like the Endurance that was found in 2022 in Antarctica is a good example of that. Very deep, very cold waters where you don't have as much effects of marine organisms, it's not turbulent, and you don't have you just don't have the oxygen for the organics to really eat at it. And you can see it in a couple places in like the North Sea and the Baltic too. There is another unique spot, which is, in my opinion, a lot cooler with the Black Sea. So once you get below a certain depth there, the water turns anoxic, so you don't have any of the oxygen. So you actually have Roman and ancient Greek 2,000-plus-year-old shipwrecks that are almost intact on the surface, which is unheard of anywhere else. So that's one of the best spots for preservation, and with a much longer time period of significant shipbuilding and sailing.
Any additional questions? Right here.
So my question's about like the documentation for terrestrial archaeology. We have to, you keep really good track of the sediment and the layer you're on and all of that stuff to keep track of provenance. How do you handle that with marine archaeology? Because the sediment's always changing and you're underwater and you can't keep as good like core samples of them. How do you handle that?
That's a good question, because it is a lot harder, but it's also depends on what it is you're excavating. So if it's like, let's say it's a submerged Paleolithic site where the sedimentation is more of a concern, versus like a shipwreck is already a time capsule. You're more concerned about spatial differences because you know what all happened at the same exact time. It's not like you have occupational period and then a lapse and then another occupational period where you're concerned about that change. More, you might have difference in like ship architecture or some crates or something that something was stored in that you'd be looking for. Less so concerned with the stratigraphy in that case.
I was really fascinated by the picture where the diver was drawing.
Oh, yeah.
What materials do they use underwater to sketch?
Pencils. Pencils.
Pencil.
Yeah. On what? It's you have waterproof papers now you can use, but there's also like plastic dive slates, which is what everyone's traditionally used. You also used to be able to use mylar paper, like for drafting and sketching. Yeah, same thing. So now there's nicer, newer waterproof journals you can use. But yeah, slates and mylar common.
Oh, another question back here.
So you mentioned a lot of the technology in the sonars, which is all acoustic. So do you notice interference when you get into bigger open areas or more animal species around and stuff? 'Cause that's a lot of interference for sound.
You can see fish or other animals that come through the imagery sometimes. I haven't personally run into a case where I've seen a significant, you can't use the data because of it, that it's a huge problem. Like you're thinking if there's whales or dolphins or things that, I haven't personally seen that, but that's also not my, specialty realm.
Where there's all the glaciers and icebergs and stuff. They're different.
So you'll have, especially with something like the multi-beam, you have to calibrate them. So it's measuring the time it takes for a reflection of the sound, but that's going to be dependent on the density or the chemical makeup of the water, and that can change with different stratifications. So maybe for the first 100 feet, 200 feet, water's one density, one temperature, and less salty, but then deeper, it might be more salty. You'll hit a chemocline or halocline or thermocline that you'll have to use a tool like a expendable bathythermograph or some device to capture those changes in density to inform how it should calculate the speed, the rate change, if that makes sense.
Do you also do the same sort of calibrating thing with magnometers, or however you pronounce that?
Usually you're keeping those much closer to the bottom. So if you have the multi-beams we were showing, you can have them mounted on a pole. You can move on and off of a vessel, or you can have them mounted at the hull, the bottom of the ship. So you can't change where that's sitting in the water. That's always going to be at the top. And if you're looking 100 feet, 200 feet, 1,000 feet deep, you have those changes that you're concerned about with the water densities. But when you got a side scan or a magnetometer, you need to be much closer to what you're looking at, what you're looking for. So otherwise, if you're way too high up, that nadir, that empty space, is way too big, so you can't see anything. And if your magnetometer is too far up, it's not going to notice a change in the field because the magnetic field effect decreases with distance. So you have to be significantly closer to everything, so you don't have the same problem.
How sensitive are the magnetometers?
Depends
what ship, what kind of level are we talking?
It would depend on what you're using. If it comes to the specific numbers, I can talk to you after. I'm not as specialized in that one.
Any other questions here? How much time do you spend in the water versus out of the water driving your ROV or other?
It depends where you are, what you're doing. If you're excavating, you're in the water the majority of the time. If you're out surveying, you could spend hours and hours or days out just mowing the lawn, moving your boat back and forth, trying to collect the data, and then going and searching through. And then you're going to spend significantly less time with a drone in the water or a person looking at these things, because you're identifying anomalies. Sometimes it's crystal clear it's going to be a shipwreck, and you go down and try and figure out what it is, look for diagnostic materials, try and figure out how old it is. But a lot of times you'll also jump down on something that's nothing. It might just be a lobster trap, or it might be a 55-gallon drum or some fishing debris or something. So it's very quick in those cases. So it depends on what you're doing.
And not being a diver, how deep have you gone, or typically, will you do the? Will you actually be in the water?
It always depends. So, some of my projects, we would limit ourselves to recreational depths. So we would set a limit of no deeper than 30 meters, about 99 feet. Because if you're diving on open circuit scuba, you have to be concerned about you have oxygen toxicity, which if you're diving your typical compressed air at those depths, you're not concerned about it. But if you're diving a different gas mixture, you might have to think about that. But then you have your nitrogen loading. So deeper you are for a longer period of time, more nitrogen build up in your blood, and you're concerned about the bends. So and then you also, the deeper you are, the faster you go through oxygen doing the same thing. So you have to keep all these things in mind with what equipment do I have, how much time can I spend there, and then what are the health concerns that I have to be thinking of. So I've had a couple projects from less than a meter deep to 30 meters. I have one excavation that I've done for 3 years now that's 34 meters to 37 meters deep. And that one, we do that with a more specialized setup. So you'll go down with larger tanks, diving compressed air, and you'll come up to a shallower depth, and you'll just breathe straight oxygen from the ship, sitting at a certain depth for a certain amount of time. Okay. All planned based on the conditions you're diving in and your nitrogen loading.
All right. Unless there's any other questions, Dana, thank you so much. This was just extraordinary. So, especially for those people who are here for the first time, we have a rule here that you cannot leave until you look through a telescope. We have Jupiter and Venus.
Yeah, we have Jupiter, so if we go quickly, we'll be able to see that before it sets.
Okay, so we have David and Robert from our Kopernik Astronomical Society. Follow them out and check out Jupiter.